Welcome. My name's Alan Brown, and welcome to the Introduction to Bid Writing as part of the Fit to Bid, brand doing Fit to Bid framework, and with Watford Borough Council. The idea with this is a foundation. This is to give you some idea of how tendering works and how you win more contracts, both in the private sector and the public sector. So if I myself, like I said, my name is Brown. I've over 10 years experience in delivering contracts, but also both sides of the table when I was at Capita, both in writing tenders and also responding to tenders, because I use third party suppliers. And so I got to see both sides of that. Yeah, I'm a fairly new partner with Brand, and we're looking to expand Fit to Bid into the north of England. And I run an advisory that advises companies on exactly what we're going to be talking about today, which is how to enter principally the public sector, but how to win tenders, how to construct tenders, etc. So we're going to go into that as we go along. So there are two interactive online workshops. There's the Introduction to Bid Writing, which is where we are today. And next week, the Improve Your Bid Response, which goes into a little bit more detail on some of the things that we're going to talk about today. So today we're going to cover why organizations go to tender, what they look for, and what they get in the basics. Like in most things, getting the basics right is essential. And the elements of what makes up a winning bid, and we'll identify what we call golden rules, which are listed there: understanding the questions, confirming your solution, articulating benefits, etc., etc. And a lot of these come down to really quite simple things to go about clarity and understanding the question, but we'll get to those as we go along. So a little bit about Brand, and Brand have been around for quite a few years now, and developed quite a network of things they've delivered. They work with chambers, with, let's say, the institution, with local authorities, and they work with small business and entrepreneurs to manage their businesses and help them grow in lots of areas, this being one of them. As you can see there, an extensive and impressive list of partnerships and collaborations with all across the southeast, and several services. Obviously, Fit to Bid is where we are today, but there's Export, Goal Mapper, Sales Mapper, the Women in Business, and Fit for Finance. We're concentrating obviously on which is my speciality, which is the Fit to Bid. Okay. And programs delivered in 2024 across all these various boroughs. This continues to grow and has proved very, very successful. So it's a good thing to be involved in. Right, so let's talk about key supply chain issues for SMEs. It says there, this is based upon feedback from companies that we've spoken to over the years. Both Brand and I've had similar conversations before I got involved in Brand. So let's go through some of these. Insufficient experience in the public sector. Yeah, because it's seen as if you haven't been involved in it, it is a different market. It can be difficult to understand how to enter, etc. And we'll get through some of that as the best way to do it. This second one, the industry is dominated by big companies that lock small and medium enterprises out. That's a perception. It's not a fact. It's not a perfect market, but the fact of the matter is there is a lot of pressure on local authorities to use local, smaller companies rather than national, large companies, depending upon what the activity is. So that perception that it's covered by, that it's locked out by large companies isn't accurate. What I can say is one of the reasons why large companies win tenders is because they respond to everything. When I was at Capita, they had an entire department, and still do have an entire department. They do nothing but respond to tenders, and that's something worth bearing in mind, that's what they do, because their business is based around that. So next, the business is largely unknown to public sector buyers. Yes, so you have to put yourself out there, and there are things that part of this process, part of Fit to Bid, is to enable that, because there are meet the buyer events, etc., which introduce you to some of these buyers and build that network. Attached to that is business owners can't reach the right people. Yeah, well, that's part of the same issue, really. Lack of a proactive marketing strategy and activity. So not understanding how you should put yourself forward, and the fact that you have to do something. Nobody's going to find you. You have to put yourself out there. Dated or no client reviews, testimonials. Client reviews and testimonials, which can then lead into case studies, are essential. And when we say, there was mentioned dated, we always aim, if you've got testimonials and reviews or case studies, they should be a maximum of a year old. So within the last year, but they are probably your strongest, absolutely your strongest part of the way to build your bid around the work you've previously done and your reviews and testimonials from your customers. Unable to devote adequate time and resources to plan properly. Yes, well, this is something that obviously with especially small companies, you're doing the job. And so it can be hard to allocate time. Throughout this process, you'll be given templates, etc., and guidance that will help, not just in these webinars, but in the other work that supports you in Fit to Bid, to enable you to do this. Because the fact of the matter is, if you can build what we call the bid library, then you can reuse that. So the work doesn't have to be redone every single time. Limited knowledge about the tendering process. Well, that's part of what we're doing here, is to uncover how tendering works, why it works, and how you can use it to your advantage. Inexperience in developing and writing strong bids. Yeah, that's part of the same thing. So understanding what a strong bid looks like as against a weak one. And no idea what put into the response to make it a winning one. It's part of, again, it's kind of part of the same argument that if you're not experienced in developing a strong bid, you're not going to understand what the content needs to be. So this is the Fit to Bid kind of process and framework. So what we encourage is to engage with procurement, and the process helps you how to do that. You are asked to complete an online bid capability assessment, just a questionnaire. It gives us an idea of where you stand and where you want and what you need support with. That helps build your bidding skills, understand the sales enablement and how that works. Then you get to the invited to meet the buyer events, which I'll probably get into a little bit more, either maybe if it's time today or maybe a bit more in detail next week. Which are an invaluable resource, finding yourself in the same companies of the buyers from local authority and from what we call tier one major companies. And as part of that, the tender advice to turn that into potential work. Okay. So this is what the benefits of the program are. So you'll get an assessment of your current bid writing skills. You'll be given knowledge and skills to implement the best practice and what best practice actually means. 2 face-to-face meet the buyer events, which are absolutely invaluable. You'll also have access to 2 confidential one-to-one tender advice sessions. So these are bespoke to each of you here, what your company actually needs, what kind of support that's needed in that area. And again, they're invaluable. Excuse me. Assistance to submit expressions of interest, which is the very, very first element of responding to a tender. Support with writing and submitting bids. A tender business model canvas, which is basically your entire process for how your company approaches this. Your value proposition, which is, again, it's what the way that I would describe this, and this is something we will get to in this webinar, is one of the things you have to do when you're responding to a tender is to get inside the head of the buyer. What problem are you solving? So your value proposition is about what problem you're solving. What do they need and what do you do to make that better for them? So it isn't a normal sales process in the classic sense that where you normally sell your services. Is slightly different, but getting in the head of your buyer and building your value proposition around that is really essential. There'll be engagement throughout the entire program with lots of people around brand doing, and then regular and ongoing feedback, so that you can understand make sure that you're getting the best out of it. So there are always, and we'll get into how you find these. There are always things going on in the local area that are tenders, and it's kind of the overall question is, did you or have you bid on anything? So I'm going to ask you a simple question. So your experience in bidding. So if you might just put in the chat 2 things. 1, put in a 1 if you've never tendered before, a 2 if you've completed a handful of tenders, and 3 regular submit. And then if you don't mind, if you have answered to 2 or 3, whether your experience or level of success, rather, not level of experience, was good, average, or bad. So that's good, Mel, that you've completed a handful and your level of success is good. And Dennis, 2 an average, 3 good. Shantuna, I do hope I've pronounced your name correctly. That you haven't previously, that's fine. 3 an average, Abigail. which actually, I'll be honest with you, there's just a few of us here, but that's probably the most common response. In some ways, so yeah, we've done a bit, but it's average, and it depends. And there's all sorts of reasons that. Right, okay. So there's no right or wrong answer to this. It just gives me some kind of idea. And Hemant, you've never tendered before, right? Okay, well that's all good, right? So Dennis, we stood up a bid team and bid team's room. Excellent. That's that's the best way to approach this, is to run it as a team. But and Sergeant, you've completed a handful. Good. Right. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, that gives an idea of what the room looks like. So I'll just move that now. So here's again, there are no right and wrongs. This is to give some ideas. So two questions. Again, just put some examples in the chat. The two questions are, why do organizations go to tender? And what broadly do they look for in a provider? And I think I've answered this, some part of this already. But if you want to put some examples in the chat, let's say if you don't mind. And again, just to give some idea of thoughts and experience as we go through this. So no responses as such as yet. Well, that's fine. Oh, wait, we are. Sorry, my apologies. Yeah, to widen your portfolio. They're looking for better solutions that fit their business needs, Abigail. Yeah, absolutely. And that, why not to put all eggs in one basket and find as many options? Yes, of course. Process run by board director, expand portfolio. Yeah, change of contract, new requirements added, social value. Social value actually is that's something we'll get into in the follow-up to this. Social value is a really, really big deal, and it's interesting you brought that up, Dennis, but that's not something we'll get into in detail today in the time that we've got. They're all really good answers. Yeah, they're absolutely. But the other thing is looking for trusted suppliers, social value, ESG. Yeah. Unhappy with the current provider. Yeah, that's fair. And again, there's work you can do to understand what the current provider situation is, and competitive tenders. Absolutely. So as it puts at the bottom there on the screen, cheapest rate. Yeah. So cheapest rate, bit of a misnomer. Price obviously is an element, and there's no point pretending it isn't, especially local authorities, because they have budgets. However, there are frameworks in place that make it really, really clear that they can't just rely upon the cheapest. They can't just go for the cheapest. They have to look at the value and the quality of the response as well. I mean, local authorities risk averse. Absolutely positive that they are. Yeah, Dennis, the new Procurement Act, yes, that comes in. I think we're going to have to go to a separate session on that, because the new Procurement Act does change things and it makes things better for SMEs, certainly. So this is really good. So there are lots of different elements, but if we bring it down to its core, it still comes down to the fact that when you're looking at answering these questions, you do want to put yourself in the mind of the buyer, which a lot of those answers have done. So let's see if we can get this onto the next screen. Right, so some of this is covered. Enable and fair and objective comparison, absolutely. Minimize the risk in supplier selection, absolutely essential. Ensure compliance with legislation and policies, both social and ethical, and terms and conditions, absolutely. Achieve a sustainably competitive price, not cheapest. Deliver return on investment on a value for money, and deliver efficiencies, preferably those that can be measured. That last element is really important, that if you're looking at tendering, you want anything that can be measured, you want to make a highlight of the fact, because public sector in particular, at all levels, love stats. They love to measure it, because my view of this, something as a mantra, is, especially in the public sector, it's not simply a case of delivering. The public sector are extraordinarily interested in how you deliver and proving that you're delivering at a in the right way and delivering value. What value add? Yeah, and the last, just about what value add can SME bring to the tender? Yes, Dennis, absolutely. So what you're doing here is you've got to look at what they need, and you've got to respond in a way that ticks all those boxes as much as possible, while selling your company as being the right one, a company that understands, an organization that understands what they need. So just expanding on it, I'm not going to go through all of these, but the fact is, why companies go to tender, what companies look for. They are looking to often something innovative, driving higher value. They want somebody that works and that understands what they're after. They need to determine your ability and your competence. That's based upon, so often that's where case studies and reviews and testimonials are really important. They're looking to improve services. So what can you do during the period of, say, the contract's 2 years or 3 years? What can you do under those, in those 2-3 years to improve things? They want a partner that fits them culturally, and we'll get to later on how you research, especially in the public sector, how you can research your potential clients so that your response actually meets with what their goals are over the next few years. Reliable, accurate, and real-time data. Yes, they do love data. And future focus, which goes with the improved services. Transparent and open communications. Absolutely. There'll be no situation where you will win a contract where you'll just get left alone for the next 2 years. They'll want to talk to you all the time. A problem-solving ethic. Yes, we have a problem. We've come to, they understand. And a lot of what I'm saying is focused on public sector because it's the area that, at least for some of you, you're not going to have experience of. Problems arise. The best way of having a problem is to say, look, there is a problem here, and then come with an answer and be open about it rather than not tell them, because that would be a bigger problem. And ensure the satisfaction of their internal customers. So in the public sector, you'll deal with the procurement department, then a further department, then there's people who say that run the local authority. That's their internal customer. At the government level, it would be a minister. So that's their internal customer. So they have people they want to please, and you help them do that. Again, help to solve a problem. First things first, this is what the start of when you look at a tender and you consider going forward with it, then there's elements you have to fill in. In the public sector, there's a supplier questionnaire. They'll ask you a whole load of questions about the makeup of your company and who has financial control and do you have the right insurance, etc., etc. The form of tender, which is what the tender actually looks like. Sometimes we offer for a non-collusion certificate being signed at some point, which means that you are working independently, and that there is no risk of any fraud or impropriety. Then there are elements to IT, these acronyms here: ITT, invitation to tender, my apologies, RFI, request for information, a request for proposal, pre-qualification questionnaire. Again, these will become clearer in the follow-up to this, where we go into a bit more detail understanding what they are. They'll ask you financial questions, sometimes can be quite searching, but this is about two things. It's about trust and making sure you operate properly, but also being blunt. They want to be sure that if they offer you a 3-year contract, that you're going to be around in 3 years' time, because reprocurement is not something they want to go through. References, if they ask them, they want to understand your policies, your pricing. The pricing can be, there's no set way for the way a potential contract will ask how your pricing is done, but you need to be aware of the fact that you'll have to make it really, really clear. All right, Dennis, that's fine. You can jump off. We'll catch up next week, and if there's any questions, feel free to contact me. It's a pleasure. Thank you. And you plan and allow sufficient time. And what we say is, and I'm sure this comes up on another slide, there will be an end date. There will be a date where you have to submit your tender response. And so if it was, say, this Friday, which would be the 25th, it was 12 noon on the 25th of October, then 12:01, it wouldn't do. It wouldn't get any further. The timing, the date and the time is really, really something that it's a dead stop, for want of a better phrase. What we say to everybody we work with is work to a day ahead of that. So get you and your team to act like everything has to be ready for the Thursday, the day before, rather than the Friday, because things happen. It's really important to your timeline, which would be given, is okay. So quick question. I've just been asked here. Typically, what is the response time given to LA tenders? Right. So normally, like I said, we'll get into a bit more next week, but you'll have a clear timeline. You'll have a start date, start of the tender response. You'll have a period where you can ask questions and see the responses. That's all anonymous, but you can ask questions and you can see the questions and answers asked by somebody else. There'll be a submission date, and they often should be a decision date. It's not always crystal clear, but it should be a decision date. That depends upon the complexity of the tender. To be honest with you, Shantanu, I think Sometimes it can be a couple of weeks. Sometimes it can take longer than that if it's part of something bigger. But they normally guide you so that you have an idea of when they're going to make a decision. But they also give you an idea of when the work is to start. So, for example, a tender response that was due in for, and this is general, right? The tender response that had to be due in, say, this Friday, and the work was to start in, say, December, you would expect a response mid-November. So it all depends upon those various factors. But normally on these, there's always a timeline laid out to give you an idea of how long it's going to be before you somewhere a time between your response and when the work has to actually start. Bearing in mind that some tenders are a little bit more complex and they have two stages. So they might have a stage where you send your response off, and then you might be asked to give a presentation as an example. Okay. Now for the real writing, as it says here. And I'm going to cover this here. Get the basics right, make the tools work for you. Get the basics right is the most important thing. We'll explain what that means. So when you're completing your response, you allow sufficient time. As I said before, you manage it through, you go through the details, you'll be shown as part of Fit to Bid what that actually means. And you use a simple spreadsheet to track targets, goals, milestones, dates throughout the process. You know where you are and you don't make a mistake. If you're able to put a bidding team together within your organization that can help you, who does what, any other stakeholders, internal and external, know your deadlines. Absolutely know your deadlines because they won't move for you. You can't ask for an extension. That won't happen. Sometimes there are times where, say, a local authority will decide to extend themselves, but that won't because somebody asked them. It would be because they've made a decision for something that's internal. So don't expect there to be an extension, and don't believe if you ask for an extension that you'll get it granted. And this one is incredibly important. When you put together your bid response, make sure someone other than the writer proofreads the response before you send to make sure it makes sense and they get it. Because one of the things you need to remember, and this is really key, is that your initial response will go to a procurement department. They're not the experts on whatever the service is or the product you provide, etc. They will have some criteria that needs to be ticked off, and your response has to be crystal clear so they understand exactly, it answers all those questions before it goes possibly further to the department or the function that actually is going to be utilizing your service or product and work with you. So getting it proofread by somebody who is outside the loop is a really powerful thing, because then if they don't get it, and you need to go back and you need to look at it again. So the principal elements of a winning bid. So directly answer the questions according to evaluation criteria. You'll hear me say many times to answer the question. Read the question, answer the question. You wouldn't believe how many tender responses do not answer questions properly or fully. Shows understanding of the broader needs and objectives. Demonstrates a credible and competent solution. Confirms the benefits for the client. Includes evidence to support and convince, and is written leanly, clearly, and precisely. Well, today's session is just about these two areas. Next week, we'll go into a lot more detail on the others. I'm just going to have a look at, there's a question come in. Abigail, you have that issue a lot. Yeah, it is an issue, and you need to work through it. The time elements, if that's what you're responding to, are really, really key. You run out of time. And sometimes some of these tenders, you'll see it will be published, and then they want the response in 3 weeks. Sometimes it's as short as that. Often it isn't, but sometimes it is, and you need to be ready, which is the reason why one of the things that Fit to Bid will get you ready to bid. That's the point. Get you in a position where you're ready to bid, because you need to do that groundwork so that you can then build the specifics around that particular tender. Okay. Fundamental golden rule of bidding. Excellent bids usually win contracts. Poor bids usually lose. And in general terms, that's absolutely accurate, without a shadow of a doubt. So, as I said, it does appear to be self-evident, but it's about what an excellent bid is. So typical issues: providing incomplete answers or not understanding the question. So I always say, I don't want people to get across like it's an exam, but in some ways it is. You're asked very specific questions on a invitation to tender. You have to answer every single one, and you have to answer it in the way that it's asked for, and you have to answer every single element of that. If you miss something out or you misunderstand the question because you've read it quickly and answered it, then it will score lower. And the scoring system will get into slightly more detail. It's simple, but it's very important. Answering the question is probably the most important thing. Read the question 3, 4, 5 times, however long it takes to make sure, and start this process early. Because if there's a question that you don't understand or you're not sure how to answer, there is a window of time in every tender response where you can ask questions. Certainly, the public sector, you can ask a question. You can send an email off normally on the platform that's used. Ask the question, and you will get it answered not directly to you. You'll get it answered in the forum anonymously, along with other people's questions and answers. So, because that helps everybody, then you get to see their questions as well. It can be a very, very useful process. Again, we'll get into more detail on this next week. But understand the question. If you don't understand the question, ask the question. Now, the fact of the matter is, if you leave this too late and you got to too late in the process where you've missed that window of opportunity to get your question answered, obviously that's a risk. So you do this early. Focusing on your business and not the customer. Absolutely. It isn't about you. It isn't about how marvelous your company is. It isn't about the machinery. It isn't about your processes in as much as how great you are. It is about what you do for the customer. What problem do you solve? It has to be the tone of it completely focused on the customer and the relevance to that tender. Again, relevance is a big deal, but we haven't got time today to go into relevance. I will cover it next week. You describe the features, not the benefits. That's an obvious one. We've all said it, but people still fall into this trap of talking about we have this, we do this. Well, my question there is, it has to pass the so what test. The so what is, well, that's great, but so what? How does that benefit me? And you have to look that way. A lack of hard evidence on your claim. So you make a claim, you have to back it up. We can do this, we can do that in a particular time scale, a particular cost, then back it up. There are many more, but they're the kind of chief ones that are the issues around poor bids. So the why question, why choose us over anybody else? It's a competitive market. So how do you make yourself stand out? Why should they use you? So again, there are no right or wrong answers at all, but just as an exercise, just thinking about your company and what you do, trying to look through their eyes, and that's from their eyes, I mean the people who write the tender. Why should they choose your company as a supplier? And how can you show evidence that you've proven expertise in the services required? Give that a little thought. I'm just going to have a drink of water because I've spoken a lot now, and put some answers in the chat. Okay. Is this recorded, Juliet? No, it's not actually recorded. Well, it is. Sorry, yes, it is recorded, and the recording will be put up on the Brand Doing YouTube channel sometime over the next few days. So if you go to YouTube and you type in Brand Doing, you'll see their channel, which has previous videos on this and other subjects. But this particular one will be. It normally takes 3 or 4 days. We're now Wednesday, so let's say Monday, Tuesday next week. It should be up there for you to catch up if there's bits that you've missed. So I assume that's why you're asking the question. So we're a specialist company in this field. Yeah, what you've got to do is you've got to explain why you being a specialist company, what's the benefit? It might seem obvious, but if it does, but you understand what I mean. So it's absolutely right. That's a good answer, but you then need to qualify it by saying. That's example of what are the benefits of being a specialist company in this field. However obvious it might seem, you still need to qualify it. Okay, I'm just conscious of time. And case studies that demonstrate success rates on why it's good. Yeah, why choose? We're proactive in tracking performance. We have 170 solutions. Yeah, proud of being open and connected, trusting partner. Yep. Feedback from Google reviews. Yeah, so these are all real strong. What you've got to do is then, here's a phrase that I want you to think about. You don't have to use these exact words. When you say something that we can do or something we're good at, something makes it, is like the phrase I want you to is which means that. So you don't have to actually use those words, but if you think about, so we can do this, we're a specialist company, as an example, I'm just using that as an example, we're a specialist company, which means that. and then you justify it and say, look, and give it that and that, what that means to them. And that's the bit that sometimes gets missed, and that's what needs to be hammered home to differentiate yourself and make your, if we come back to the good bids or excellent bids win, poor bids don't. One of the things that makes it is not that if you're in a crowded market, how do you differentiate yourself? First and foremost, you differentiate yourself by making sure that you answer every question, you evidence everything, and you say, we can do this, which means that, and that which means that is, how does that benefit them? So case studies, photo evidence, customer feedback, absolutely. All those things are, yeah, you can use written and published. You can, up to a point, you can use whatever you like to justify yourself within the bounds of what they ask for. Sometimes they limit the number of documents or the length of the documents. But if you get nothing from today, everybody, if you get nothing, that which means that is a real, it should be a mantra through everything that you do. We can do this, we can do that, which means that, and that which means that is the benefit to the client. Okay. And some evidence, these have been, so your examples here, everybody, really, really good. How well do you know the client? Do you have a relationship? Relationships still work, and you can develop relationships in the public sector as much as the private one. Can you evidence? Of course, we've talked about that. Where can they find the evidence? Do you provide it, or do you provide links, etc.? Can you demonstrate expertise? Have you worked on similar contracts? That's a case study thing. And the knowledge and experience of your team. They will be interested in the people that make up your team. Just let me not jump about. Sorry. They'll be interested in the makeup of your team and the people that deliver the contract. They'll ask about your team. So and here we go. So is it enough? And I'm hoping that this is really obvious. Just giving them a link to your brochure, is that enough? And I'm hoping all of you about this one going, absolutely not. Because a brochure is by definition normally quite high level. It may well say things that all your competitors say. It will contain generally generic language. It'll be focused, valued, it'll be fine, but it won't give them, it won't do the what, to come back to that, which means that level that's required. So people do this. Surprisingly, people do this. Just, well, here's a link to our company brochure that answers all your questions. No, it doesn't. Not in the way that they want. So the golden rule. Basically, this golden rule is answer the question, which we're talking about before, but understanding what you're being asked and the objectives are critical to writing a winning answer. Sorry, I've just got a technical thing here. Right, that's gone now. Understanding what you're being asked and objectives are critical to writing a winning answer. Yes, understanding, reading everything, understanding what they're after. And there are more things. When we get to research, there are things beyond the questions that they're answered that you can actually give to show that you understand what they are actually looking to do overall, what the bigger picture for that local authority, as an example, is. So understand their objectives and drivers. What does the project needs? Why are they doing what they're doing? And what's the bigger picture? What are the needs of the project that you're there to fulfill? And how do you add value, which is not just all nice to have, but what is genuine added value? What can you add over and above necessarily what they're asking for over a period of time? And it doesn't have to be always concrete. It can be an aim. But the fact of the matter is, it means you're looking to differentiate yourself, that you really want to work with this organization. You want to deliver something on their behalf. And once you've got to that, you have, as it says that, you have the foundation of the winning bid because you understand what you're trying to fulfill. So in the invitation to tender, the ITT, you read that specification in detail. It's the first document you should look at. We can ask questions about it. We'll get answers in that window I explained. You can carry out research, we'll get to very shortly. And you clarify the client requirements through the formal Q&A process, which I just said there. You can ask questions and you can see the answers. And the wonderful thing about that is you can see other people's questions and answers as well. And another potential respondent might have asked a question you'd not thought of. It's an incredibly valuable resource. So we are hammering home identifying the question elements. It is really important. It helps you structure your answer, and the answer will score a few marks if it partially answers the questions, or and this is it's a key part, and this is the reason why we're hammering on. It's the biggest golden rule. So this is a question from a real bid. So how many elements must the please, how can a new supplier stand a chance of winning a bid if there are no previous reviews? We will get in if there are we'll get more into this next week, but the fact of the matter is, if you are, and I'm assuming because you're new or you're moving into a new area, if you're a new business, then there are some barriers there, but the best way is potentially to partner with another company. It's something we can get involved in later on. Or what you can do at the very least is you can say how you would manage it, and you talk about the experience of your team to be able to deliver that. You be open and honest. But if then you work it around, if you haven't got a case study or review in that area, then you talk about your experience is the best way of managing that, Juliet. Hope that answers your question. Right. So if you read that, how many elements must our answer address? It's not really a test, but I want you to read through, and then we're going to define how many elements are being asked to be addressed in the answer to that question. Okay, so where are we? 5 or 6? Yeah. So we would say that there are 6. So we put them in here. High-level description of the structure of the company. Very important. They want to understand how you're going to, because that helps understand how something's being delivered and managed. The structure of the division of part of the company responsible, the number of people in each team, description of the resources, describe other key contracts being delivered in a similar time frame, and how resource conflicts will be managed. They do like to know this. If there's a single point of failure, if somebody's away, somebody leaves, somebody's ill, how do you manage that? Are the kind of things they'd be interested to know. So this just gives you an idea of the way you've got to look. This is a typical response you'd need to be able to answer in detail. So we mentioned scoring, and this is across, certainly in the public sector, this is pretty much the standard and accepted way of things being scored from 0 to 5. And obviously, nobody wants to contemplate a score of 0, 1, 2, or even 3. You're aiming for 5. Sometimes 4 is adequate, but you're obviously aiming for 5. So let's look at the top of the shop. A well-defined solution linked to clear benefits backed by strong evidence, quantification been included, which shows clear value. So you're able to evidence what you've done in the past. You're also able to put some numbers around what your solution would be. You're forward thinking. You understand how you're benefiting the supplier, and it's really crystal clear. A score of 5 is what you're after. A score of 4, a good solution, benefits shown with reasonable evidence, some value through quantification. So they're what you're aiming for. Once you go further down, you're starting to see that actually the core part here is you're just not answering the question fully enough. There isn't enough evidence, but you're not answering the question. And that's where you'll fall down. Now, often on these, nearly always, actually it's supposed to be every time, but sometimes it falls down. You get, if you're not successful, then you get feedback. And that feedback is a gift because they get to show you where you've scored, where you came, what your score was, and where your weak points were, which means that you can improve that for your next response. But again, we can get into that in a bit more detail in next week. But so you're aiming to be up here. You definitely don't want to be there. And the thing about this is 4 and 5 can be subjective, but 3, 2, 1, and 0, this is all in your gift. You can avoid all of this just by answering the question and making sure that when you do which means that, and you evidence everything. So this is completely avoidable. That nobody should have any excuse for having scores of 0 to 3, if really. This can be a little bit more subjective. So you always aim for the top, obviously. Right, so I'm conscious of time. So this thing here, so you won't get a copy of the presentation, Hermat, no, but you will be able to see it online in a few days, as I said. But no, we don't actually share the PowerPoint, no. So what are your potential source of information on the customer? When doing research, what information are you looking for? And rather than ask you, I'm going to go through, because I'm conscious of time. So write down the information you need and where you could get this. So if somebody wants to respond to where, so we're looking in the public sector, how would you find information out on the, say, a local authority? I'll say on Watford Borough Council, how would you research them? Or in fact, any company, what would you do? Well, the first answer, say you were looking at brand doing, you wanted to research brand doing, you would go to their website. And yeah, abigail.gov.uk, we'll get that. Yeah, excellent. You would go to their website and you would see all the people there and who their advisors are. And I'm not on there, should be soon. But you can get, and you can see who they are. You can look them up on LinkedIn. You can see other information that's on the company on the website. Yeah, so their view of the world and themselves. You can look at their company page and see posts they've done and information about the company, so at least you understand who you're dealing with, and you can see what they're involved in. This is all really, really strong information: YouTube channels, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Now then, when we're looking at the public sector, the thing about the public sector is they have to publish everything within certain boundaries of certain elements, but for the most part, they have to publish everything. So the public sector is really easy to research in as much as you can find everything. So you can see their plan for the next 5 years. You can look at a particular tender, think, well, actually, that's part of something bigger that they're doing, an infrastructure program. And you can build in information that you research into your response to show that you've actually done your research and you understand what they're after. You can look at other tenders, etc. But this understanding what their challenges are and what their business plan is, this is all published, every bit of it. A private company puts on their website what they want you to know, whereas the public sector, they have to put everything on. Even if you really push, you can sometimes get minutes of meetings. It's a remarkable resource, and it is underutilized. When you're thinking of, say, you're looking at a tender in a particular area, the very first thing you should be looking at doing is to look at the council's website, look at everything related to that to understand what it is that they're looking to achieve over the next period of time, because you can use that information to make your bid stand out. So what drives them? Do you have any contacts there, or are there names you can contact? Who is doing the buying, influencing, making decisions, etc.? So they'll give you all this information. Now, there are no specifics on the websites from one local authority. They might have set out differently. They might use different headings, but the information is still contained. It's an amazing resource. An hour or two spent researching a public sector client can give you oceans of information, which will help you make your bid stand out. So as you can see, there are lots and lots of different areas, and throughout the program, we pointed to some of these things to explain in more detail what the council procurement looks like, what the people involved, what are they doing, etc. Just to give you this extra information, which simply in the private sector just isn't available in this way. So researching your sources, obviously there are things you can do. You can look at the bid document. Obviously, that gives you, they understand their thinking. Any of your own knowledge, look at previous bids and feedback if you had some. The annual report, if there is one, you can look on Glassdoor, which is a website. It tells you about what people's view of the actual company is. You can set up Google Alerts. I haven't got time really to explain how Google Alerts work, but they are really great, that gives you alerts on when a company is mentioned online. You can look at news, you can attend events. There are lots of things you can do here to look at how that company or that organization operates, and how you can use all that information to help you answer or help you build your response to be as strong as possible, because you understand them and you make them think, well, this is a company that we want to work with because they understand what we're trying to achieve. So we're looking for, not go through all of these, the strategy, the philosophy, what they deem important, which might be different from what you deem important, what their challenges are, what their critical issues are, the kind of language they use, so you can reflect their language back on them. Anything really that you can use that think, do you know what, we should use that's really, really strong. As it says there, the more you know about your prospects and clients in advance, the better. So research is easy. I'm hoping again this is a light bulb moment for some of you, that because the information is available, it's an amazing resource, and it's kind of, it's almost a crime not to use that information that's available online to you for free in detail. So just pause for breath. We have now, just before we've gone to the case studies here, I'm hoping then that these core things we've gone through today is the clarity of language, answer the question, make sure it has a which means that, make sure you've researched the client as much as possible, and you're understanding what their challenges are and what they're hoping to achieve. Sometimes there's a bigger picture outside that particular tender, because you reflect that back on them. You build this into the tender response, and it makes you look like a company that they want to work with because you understand what they're after. You're solving a problem for them. So these are examples of case studies of people that have gone through the pit to bid process and have become, I've benefited from it. This company here, Pallets Yard, ended up getting a contract with Heathrow, which is remarkable. Heathrow are known as a tier one supplier, as you imagine, as a huge organization. They have a very formal tender process, and although they're private sector, not public, the process is very, very specific, and so you have to follow a similar kind of path. Another one, oh yes, this is a facility management, a cleaning company now have, which is a very competitive market. I mean, really competitive is cleaning companies. I know I work with a few, immensely competitive. And for them, and the only way to get through is for your tender response to be superb and stand above everybody else's, which is what J&L managed to do. And then Healthy Air Technology, been taken part in several areas here, and wonderful that Dr. Cow here won Businesswoman of the Year, going through all the Brandwidth's business support programs, not just Fit to Bid, but other areas as well. So there's huge support here, or a huge amount of support available to you, which I really want you to take advantage of. And really trying to utilize as much as you possibly can. Obviously, there's these webinars, there's one-to-ones, there's other support. So please make use of it, because when I first met the guys at Brandwidth, it was like we were having conversations about what we would have liked when we all started in business, and this is what Brandwidth's there is to help you to do with support of with government support, which is great. So just quickly now. There is, if you go to the Fit to Bid website, Watford, there's a big quality questionnaire. You'll be sent this link anyway. And it starts a process of us understanding where you currently are. There are these skill workshops like today. There are one-to-ones, which you'll be invited to attend, which are really great because they give you the ability to talk about your business specifically in confidence and how you need to be supported. So on the 13th of November, there is the first of the two Meet the Buyer events. You'll be sent a link to be invited to this if you haven't received it already. 13th November, 4 o'clock till 6:30. I'm hoping to be there myself. And again, to be in the room with these people and organizations, representing these organizations, is an incredible resource. It just doesn't happen. So you'll be there with the procurement departments of local authorities plus tier one suppliers. The links will be sent to you. I don't send them out. Sorry, Johnny, but again, I hope I got your name correct. But you will be around this process. You'll be supplied with the links to everything to register. In your one-to-one, you'll be asked to complete a participant action plan, which looks very similar to this. I think there's been a slight redesign, but it's very similar to this, which gives us an idea of what you're doing, what your plan is to go to, and also I think now if there's any extra roles and jobs being action from this, to give you an idea of where, but also to give the local authority an idea of how successful this is. This is a really important document to get completed, and it gives you the basis of your action plan to move forward. And that gets completed across those two one-to-one sessions. So attend the skill webinars. So Tracy James at Brandwidth, she'll be in touch anyway, but that's her, Tracy at brandwidth.co.uk. And numbers there. You can attend the skill webinars, which you're already at. You can book the one-to-one tender session. We will reach out to you to attend those. Look to submit an expression of interest on major construction projects. Again, we will help you with those that apply, and then work to develop a winning bid. These are just elements of the program. You'll be invited to all of them where appropriate. So that's a lot. I know we've only got a few minutes left. I do have a terrible habit of overrunning, so I think I've done quite well there. So with all that, I know that's a lot. The idea of this particular foundation webinar wasn't to suddenly make you experts on bidding, but it was to give you an idea so that you go away and you think, all right, okay, I know a little bit more now. So the process we will get into on the 30th. A bit more detail on the actual process and what a tender response actually looks like to kind of demystify that process, especially in the formal world of the public sector. And that will hopefully again demystify that. And if you then make use of all the various channels that are going to be made available to you, both the one-to-ones, the meet the buyer events, and the other support processes that go around this fit to bid program to help you develop bids and help you develop bids that actually should be successful with hitting all these elements. So I'm going to summarize and say there are these things you need to do. You need to answer the question, understand the question, answer the question. If you talk about your company and what it can do, then remember which means that, and make sure that it is a benefit and what it does for them. Research the client as much as humanly possible, because there's a huge amount of information there. And if you get those three things right, then you have the basis for a really, really strong bid. And the reason why this matters is because so many people, even in the most competitive areas, and I mentioned before about facility management and cleaning contracts, which are probably one of the most competitive areas where there's so many companies, people win in that area because they put the work in to make sure that their bid stands out because it hits all those marks. There are other elements to do, but those three things, if you hit those three things we've discussed today, then you're in a very, very good position. And with that, thank you, Mel. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope you found this useful. Feel free to ask questions, some questions toward Brando or to myself after this. If there's anything else, you've be multiple contacts across the Fit to Bid program to support you. And like I said, I hope this has actually enabled to think that actually is available. I want to tell you something really, really quickly. Something to bear in mind is you have a right to be here. You have a right to respond to tenders. You have a seat at the table, for one of a better phrase. That there is a lot of emphasis, and we will go into this in more detail next week for those that can attend, that there is a lot of pressure on local authorities in particular to keep wealth in the community, which means to use local companies, often because not just because they're local, but also because they're more efficient and they understand, and we get into understand what that local area needs. And when you get into areas like social value, then they have an interest in making sure that things benefit the area. So, you do have a right to do this. It isn't a closed shop just for large companies. It absolutely is not. And, the more small companies respond, the stronger they will be. The reason, like I said, the reason why large companies win often, not every time, but often, is because they respond. They're in the game, for want of a better phrase. So they respond to everything they can. And on the element of a numbers game, obviously they're going to win some. But this belief that it's a lockout, that's not the case. There are some infrastructure programs, huge infrastructure programs, where smaller companies won't be the main bidder. It might be looking to bring in smaller companies, and that's involving something called a framework, which is, we haven't got time really to look into how frameworks work. But for these individual tenders, you have every right. So, quick question. So we're based on rather than neighbourhood of Harrow. Does this from bidding for Watford Council as well as excellent? I think what you should do is bring that up in your one-to-one. No, it's not. It doesn't automatically exclude you. No, it doesn't. It depends upon the makeup of the actual tender. The fact is, though, all this based on how to go onto Harrow's website, have a look because everything they're talking about here applies there. But you can have this discussion in your one-to-one. So yeah, it doesn't automatically exclude you at all. It doesn't. There's a preference there. But if you're the best bid and you're in a neighboring area, then obviously you can still win work. But I would take that to your one-to-one. Okay, so you'll be uh, we will reach out. It might be myself, it might be so there's several other advisors. We will reach out and offer you, open our calendar so you can book a one-to-one session. That's what will happen. So you will receive those invites. Okay. And if you don't, then just reach out and say I haven't something. Just send contact Brandoin directly on any of their email addresses. Then we'll make sure. But we should reach out to you. Okay, thank you so much for your time. And we're just on 12 o'clock now, or nearly. Have a really good day. I look forward to all of you that can make it next week when we take this into the next stage. All right. Thank you so much.